So SecTor's here today with Iain Paterson, Managing Director of SecTor Inc., who's been talking about data breaches and incident response. So explain what you covered in your talk.
So my talk was kind of a 101 fundamentals about how to manage a security incident, how to identify a security incident, pre-breach, during a breach, and post-breach.
Okay, what are some of the common mistakes that companies make when trying to respond to a data breach incident?
Yeah, I think some of the bigger things are tactical stuff that happens on the ground. Initial preparation is great, but during a breach, one of the fundamental problems is people try and run their teams too hard for too long. People burn out during these incidents, especially your technical stars. They need time to rest. So you have to think about, how am I going to utilize my resources knowing that people have a limitation on how long they can work for to try and remediate these problems while you're still trying to balance your business recovery objectives.
So it's kind of like intensive short-term project management because people are a limited resource, energy is a limited resource, and you have to manage it properly.
Exactly, and it's a high-pressure type of situation because you may not be able to transact with your customers. You may not be able to transact as a business, right? And those concerns obviously weigh heavily on the minds of senior management, but the incident handlers have to balance the realities of the team and their capabilities, and the longer you try and push, the more you're likely to make mistakes.
Is there a kind of standard playbook that can apply to most data breach incidents, or do they differ enough that you kind of need to pull different playbooks off the shelf to cope with different kinds of breach?
Yeah, when you're building an incident response plan, there's a series of activities that you would put in place. So identification of an event, initial discovery of the indicators of the event, and triage, containment, and then recovery, and then post-breach, right? So all those are standard. How you react to each breach, though, and the strategies you use to react will be unique depending on the type of breach and the organization and what their recovery objectives are.
Right. Okay. So you have to think about multiple disciplines. It's not just technical containment and getting the business back online. You've got to think about things like legals and forensics as well.
Yeah. So part of what I talked about, and it doesn't get talked about enough, how to communicate externally and internally. Things like bringing in external legal counsel and establishing privilege. Super important depending on where this is going to go. If there's going to be a class action lawsuit or something, having that privilege can be huge for the whole e-discovery process. And I think the worst thing you see in a lot of breaches is a failure to properly manage external communications.
If you do get it wrong, if you do botch it, what are the worst ramifications? I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen to you financially, from a reputation perspective and so on?
Yeah, reputationally, the brand damage of a breach can be pretty severe. It's interesting that it's not always reflected in the stock price of these companies. If we look at Target, for example, their stock price is back up to over what it was before they were breached. So reputation will take a hit initially. In the long term, though, depending on the scope of the breach, if you have many class action lawsuits that take effect, if you have regulatory failures, you may fail to continue to exist as a business in the long term, particularly if you're managing, for example, healthcare records or something like that. The fines associated with that and the regulatory penalties would be tremendous for most companies. So that's kind of the worst case. If you screw up your incident response and don't inform the right people and don't manage the communications and manage the event properly, it could be the end of the business.
Okay, so wise words to think about incident response in advance. I guess the stitching time really does save money.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, lovely. Thanks so much for coming along to SecTor this year. We really appreciate being here.
Thank you so much.